Have you ever had that feeling, that there's some kind of deeper logic to life, something that goes way beyond just random chance? Well, today we're going to dive into a framework that says exactly that. It suggests our lives are actually governed by these unbreakable laws, all designed to help us grow and become, as our source material puts it, spiritually alive.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll get into the foundation of these hidden laws. Then, we'll look at why so many of us get spirituality kind of wrong. After that, we'll unpack our different levels of consciousness, find the key to genuine awareness, and finally, see what a spiritually alive life really looks and feels like.
All right, let's jump right into the core idea. The foundation of this whole thing is that our existence is not just a series of accidents. Nope, it's actually governed by what the Source calls the immutable laws of creation.
And here's what's so fascinating. These laws have a purpose. They aren't random or punishing. Everything from the family you were born into to the challenges you're facing right now is perfectly orchestrated to give you the exact spiritual lessons you need to grow.
Think about it like this. You wouldn't try to build an airplane while ignoring the laws of physics, right? It would be a total disaster. Well, the argument here is that trying to navigate your spiritual life without understanding these spiritual laws is just as pointless. They're presented as fundamental, non-negotiable facts of our reality.
So this brings up a huge question. If these laws are always working to help us, why do so many of us feel stuck? This next part tackles the big misconception that really gets in our way.
It's a really fair question, isn't it? I mean, if the universe is set up for us to succeed, why does spiritual progress feel so hard, or, for a lot of people, just impossible? The answer, according to this perspective, is all about how we see the world.
And here's the heart of the problem. We try to understand a higher spiritual reality using our lower physical tools, right? We imagine an afterlife based on what our physical life is like. We think about spiritual perfection based on our emotional idea of a perfect world. We're trying to grasp a completely different dimension using the wrong senses.
And that brings us to the filters we all use. The idea here is that we experience everything through different levels of consciousness, and each one totally changes how we interpret spiritual truths.
So when we're mostly operating from a physical level, that physical filter, spirituality gets shrunk down to a tool for making our material life better. We pray for a better job, a bigger house, an easier life. The spiritual basically becomes a servant to the physical.
Now, if we're mainly using our emotional or mental filter, spirituality turns into an intellectual hobby. It's all about philosophical debates, arguing over concepts, or just dreaming about a perfect world. But it all stays up here in our heads. It never becomes a real guiding force in our lives.
And here's the real kicker. It's called the override principle. Whichever level of consciousness is strongest in us, it dominates the others. And for us, for modern humans, our intellect and physical senses are so highly developed, so loud, that they completely drown out that quieter voice of spiritual awareness.
And the results of this override? Well, they're all around us. When spiritual truths get filtered this way, you get the rise of dogma and control in religions. You get a focus on empty rituals instead of inner meaning. It leads to things like false humility, or believers who lose their faith when their material prayers aren't answered. And it keeps people trapped in these repeating karmic cycles, facing the same lessons over and over because they just can't see the spiritual point.
Okay, so how do we break through all these filters? The Source tells us we need to use a completely different tool, a faculty that's designed specifically to perceive spiritual reality directly.
And that tool is called true intuition. Now, it's absolutely critical we understand this is not what we normally call intuition. It is not a gut feeling, it's not our imagination, it's not some vague emotional hunch. It's described as a completely separate faculty for receiving direct, clear guidance from a higher source.
The difference is just fundamental. What we usually call intuition is often just our feelings or unspoken desires bubbling to the surface. But true intuition, in this framework, is about submitting to those laws of creation and receiving objective guidance that has nothing to do with what we personally want.
So how do you reawaken this faculty? The path is laid out in a really clear 3-step process. First, recognition. You just have to acknowledge these laws even exist. Then comes acknowledgement. You have to accept that they apply directly to your life. And the final, biggest step is submission, making a conscious choice to align your entire life with them.
So what's the payoff? What actually happens when we start living this way, guided by true intuition, instead of our intellect or emotions?
And it's so important to get this straight. Becoming spiritually alive doesn't mean you abandon your life and go live in a cave. It's about reordering your inner world. Your mind, your emotions, your body, they don't go away. Instead, they finally have a new captain, a higher, spiritual awareness that guides them, creating this incredible, harmonious whole.
And the ripple effect is just huge. When human creativity is guided by this spiritual knowledge, our source predicts a literal explosion of progress. Science, art, culture, everything would accelerate. But now, it would all be directed toward things that actually uplift and ennoble humanity.
To leave you with one final thought from the text, just listen to this quote. It frames our entire life on Earth as a brief school day, but with the highest possible stakes. And the choice is pretty stark. Learn the lessons and continually live, or ignore them and continually suffer.
So that leaves us with this one big question to chew on. What if every single moment, the good, the bad, the frustrating, is a lesson? And what if the only tool we need to finally understand it all is a part of ourselves that we've simply forgotten how to use?